In 1934, a New England historian named William Goodwin went to London and found, among the Elizabethan State Papers, a document which identified the site of the first Elizabethan colony in the New World. That site was the bay which we now call Narragansett Bay in Rhode Island. In the 1970s, the two most noted authorities on Elizabethan exploration, David Beers Quinn and Samuel Eliot Morison, both confirmed that this was the destination of a well-planned 1583 colonization attempt, authorized by the Queen herself. After 30 years of research, I have concluded that the 28-foot-tall stone-and-mortar structure, which still stands in Newport, Rhode Island today, was originally an Elizabethan church and was to have been the city center for the colony. What we see today is but the skeleton of what I have determined was a 48-foot-tall classical building. The 8 sturdy pillars were covered with plaster and faux painted to look like cut marble with a technique called sgraffito. Atop the pillars rested a 2-foot-tall wooden entablature. Above that rose 8 Corinthian pilasters, or flat columns, each 20 feet tall. And above the capitals of the pilasters was a 4-foot-tall entablature, surmounted by a hemispherical dome 12 feet in diameter, and capped with a 6-foot finial. The tower got built, but the colonization effort failed, and the building was abandoned. 50 years later, in 1636, the tower was claimed by one of the first colonial settlers in the bay, who later went on to become the first governor of Rhode Island. In his 1677 will, the governor requests his body be buried about 100 yards west of his stone-built windmill, where his grave can still be seen today. During the Revolutionary War, the British occupied Newport, and they stored their gunpowder in the rooms of the tower. In 1779, they had to make a hasty retreat from Newport, and so the Americans wouldn't get the stores of gunpowder. They set them on fire and blew the roof off the building. In 1942, tower researcher Philip Ainsworth Means writes, "The circular arcaded tower at Newport continues to be the most enigmatic and puzzling single building in the United States, a building which may hold the buried key to the early Christian history of the Western Hemisphere." In 1990, William Penhallow, professor of astronomy and physics from the University of Rhode Island, found several astronomical alignments in the windows of the tower. Standing in certain places in the park, you can see through various pairs of windows and observe important celestial events. For example, through one pair of windows, you can see the sun just after sunrise on the winter solstice. Through another pair of windows, you can see the full moon at lunar minor. This is an event that happens once every 18.6 years. And through another pair, you can see the bright star Dubhe in the bowl of the Big Dipper, which, along with the star Merak, points to the North Star. Penhallow concluded that the designer of the tower was not just familiar with astronomy, he really knew about astronomy and probably used the interior as camera obscurus solar disk calendar rooms. With Penhallow's discoveries as a starting point, I have written 10 books and 20 videos explaining the who, what, where, when, why, and how of the tower. John Dee was not only the architect of the colonization effort of 1583, he was also the architect of the tower. His cryptic writings and illustrations are chock full of riddles and visual puzzles that describe the tower's location, proportions, dimensions, and its function. One of John Dee's books contains what I call the hidden blueprint for the tower. Another contains a cryptic map of Narragansett Bay, then called the Dee River. In 1580 and in 1582, John Dee drew 2 large maps of North America, which are currently in the British Library. They clearly depict the distinctively triangular Block Island, which points to the mouth of Narragansett Bay, which John Dee had named after himself the Dee River. I know all this sounds too fantastic to be true, but sometimes truth is stranger than fiction. And I certainly don't expect you to take my word for it, but I do invite you to come down and see all the evidence for yourself. The Newport Tower Museum is just 50 steps northeast of the tower at 152 Mill Street.